Welcome, welcome, welcome. Chemistry of joy, so please be joyful.
Did you bring your joy today? Yeah? Who brought their joy?
Seriously, let's all talk.
Yeah.
Talk. Yeah? Let's talk together. And if you have spontaneous eruptions of joy, they're very welcome, like hallelujahs, you know, just when the spirit
Just
moves
raise your
you.
hands in the air.
Okay, do you want to ask them about MDMA? Just go to that, and then we'll introduce ourselves.
All right, I guess we're gonna jump right in.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer if you don't feel compelled to. But who has tried MDMA? Oh yeah, can I get an amen? That's awesome. Okay.
Preaching to the
Who
converted.
has tried either kanna today or kanna before in their lives? Beautiful. It's a beautiful heart-opening plant. We'll talk about it a little later. What about cacao? Anyone enjoy cacao? Another beautiful heart opener. Okay, experienced, open, joyful hearts. I love it.
Yeah, I don't know if we've got anything to...
We've got nothing to teach you.
Just say, keep
See you
going,
later.
keep doing it, you know.
You guys are doing it. You don't...
Yeah, so welcome. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Jane Garnett. I'm an Oxford-educated psychotherapist and host of Sex, Psychics and Psychedelics, a podcast. And I'm going to ask Stephanie a bunch of questions today. And Stephanie is a neuropharmacologist, a researcher, a community builder, and the founder of Beyond the Bench Consultancy, which is a psychedelics and plant medicine consultancy. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you enunciate so well.
Thank you.
Wow.
I get something for nothing with my English accent, so I've had to hang on to it because it gives me extra
Canadians are
intelligence
good
points
too. That's what I've been told.
Canadians get kindness points.
Okay, what about
British people get intelligence points.
Okay.
But no, Stephanie's got the goods all round. She's a radical being, and that's why I'm really happy to be here tonight. So I have two brief backstories, if you guys will hang in with me. So one is my career backstory, which is starting in Hollywood getting me interested in psychology leading me to mental health, working in mental health leading me to, I would say, depression, as in, this kind of sucks. I'm not feeling so good myself, and I'm talking to people who aren't feeling so good, and why am I here, and what the fuck is going on, right? You just get into a corner with yourself sometimes, and the questions are just too confronting. So I was like, okay, I got to go on an adventure and figure this shit out. So that led me to psychedelics. This was, sort of my psychedelic exploration started kind of officially 13 years ago. Psychedelics led me to joy, to the part of myself that wasn't online. And the part that I was realizing wasn't really online in mental health. You know, we weren't talking about joy. We were fixated on brokenness. We were talking about what went wrong in the past, you know, what people didn't do for us. And we weren't looking at what we could cultivate based on what we already have. And so psychedelics took me back really to my child, who is a very sort of, as an inner child, very sort of strong character, who is very insistent on joy. Thank you. I hate holding the microphone. So this insistence on joy, you know, that's what I kept running into through my psychedelic journeys. And so I just couldn't deny it. And then I was realizing this is what people were not engaging with enough in their own lives. You know, I'm talking about adults who have gotten kind of a bit worn down by whatever their conception of arrival is, what they feel like the marks they should be meeting in life. They don't really have that much always to do with your soul unless you're more evolved, which maybe everyone here is. Okay, so that gets you up to speed with my kind of general career story. And then within that, there's my MDMA story. So MDMA story started 20 years ago in Bali. at a full moon party overlooking the paddy fields and being with a group of humans who were all connecting with each other, and they were all different ages and sizes and races. Like, holy fuck, this is a dream I didn't even know I had, which is all these people connecting together from their hearts. This is unbelievable. I call up my mom. I'm like, Mom, I had this experience. This is crazy shit.
Did you tell her?
I did. And what was so funny, she said, oh, darling, that's so wonderful. She said, so wonderful. Is it safe? Oh, yeah, I think so.
Did you get it from a stranger?
Oh, yeah. So I had no idea if it was safe, but I knew it was something I was very interested in. So that was part one of my MDMA story, which is MDMA equals enlightenment. Part two of MDMA's story is MDMA is the devil. And that was me at Oxford just caning it, trying to get out of my head and into my feet and into the ground, and so excited by techno and jungle and the stuff that now is kind of looping back in culture, which is really exciting. I feel like such a veteran. I'm like, oh, we used to listen to that back in the day. And so, but yeah, I just hammered it, and I think we were taking ecstasy, mixtures of all sorts of shit, too much of it, and getting really depleted and getting depressed and not cultivating other parts of life. So I was like, this is evil shit. I'm avoiding it. So actually, when I went back into cut to I'm a psychologist and I'm on this kind of psychedelic ride, I kept avoiding MDMA. I'm like, the plants are good, the chemicals are bad, and I was there for a while. I was like, ayahuasca is good, MDMA is bad, and then I couldn't deny it because people keep putting this evidence in front of me, right? There's documentaries, I'm going to psychedelics conferences, and I start seeing, oh, this is really like a major, and I really stand by this is a really major therapeutic tool. It's just fucking major. Like, it holds people in an extraordinary and unique way so that they can be in their truth, right? Whether it's couples or people working through PTSD. So I was like, okay, fine. I'll accept that MDMA has some value. This is like part 3, compromise in the relationship. Okay, whatever. We can coexist, fine. Just don't come too close. And then, and this is quite recent, really, found myself back on the dance floor. Oh yeah, and back at the rave, and I was like, shit. Oh my God, I cannot deny it. I've learned too much over the years about people. I've been with people, I've been studying people, and I'm looking at these people, and a lot of them pretty young, and they've been doing a lot of dancing and a lot of MDMA and a lot of getting together, and they've been co-evolving. They just have. And it's not only in one direction, right? Because people are not always aware of what they're doing. The partying can get really intense, but there's something really interesting going on, I think, in rave culture and, house music culture, and these groups of people who are getting together and are feeling safe enough to look in each other's eyes with acceptance. There's bilateral stimulation going on, which is, through moving your feet, right? You can get it through walking. This is one of the principles of EMDR, which uses bilateral stimulation to process trauma. I can see some of you nodding. Is anyone familiar? Not familiar? Yeah. Okay, good. Sophisticated crowd, Jesus Christ. So you've got bilateral stimulation, you've got trauma processing, you've got groups of people looking in each other's eyes, you've got acceptance, you've got pleasure through music, through the idea that we're all having fun, you've got freedom. I'm like, wait a minute, if this isn't the most connection, but multidimensional, right? Not just you and me in our couples therapy. So I'm like, this is just undeniably important shit. We have to look at it. This is what needs to happen. The therapy model is too lonely. I've got to research it. This brings me to this radical being here who knows about the science, because I'm like, I got to figure out my come downs. I'm like, I got to take MDMA. Like, I get terrible come downs, but I got to take MDMA because I got to be part of this culture, because I want to be part of this conversation. Stephanie, help.
That was our first, it was a real fireside chat. You know how it's like proverbial fireside chat? There's no fire. There was a fire. It was beautiful, and we just got together to just chat and get to know each other better. And this was the question that led us to realizing that these were topics that we were both so interested and fascinated in. And I also just wanted to say a quick thing about the rave culture. I would argue that without the rave culture, we wouldn't be here today with MDMA being evaluated by the FDA. It needed to get out into the collective and the community and be experienced by a lot of people so that everyone could have that aha moment that Jane had and that many of us probably had, right? And if there wasn't that collective experience, there wouldn't be this push, right? Push for this therapy, and not just the therapy, but just the collective use and the benefits that come from it, you know?
Yeah. 100%. So can we break down the MDMA story? And we're not just going to talk about MDMA. I want to talk about other things that you can kind of take and joy practices. But I'd like to look into these sort of the highs and the lows of MDMA with you from more of a kind of chemical, scientific perspective. So let's start with MDMA as God, MDMA as enlightenment. Is it like, how is it? Why is it? Tell us about that chemical situation.
Sure. As a neuropharmacologist, obviously very interested in the brain, but always very fascinated by drugs and how they work, not just the typical Western medicine drugs, but, you know, I was always very interested in plant medicines as well. My background is Greek and Egyptian. The plant medicines are strong in those cultures. And I'd like to just like take it a little back just before I answer your question. I spent quite a few years doing a research fellowship in the ICU looking at traumatic brain injuries. And I had this, like, I call it like my 50% aha moment, where I realized that traditional mental health drugs were just not the answer for this particular patient population. And then I was also realizing that that was the same thing for a lot of different patient populations. And it was actually a thesis for my graduate degree that like antipsychotics just wouldn't take people to true healing over time. And it kind of just ended there. Like, that's why I say it was my 50% aha light bulb moment, because I didn't do anything more with that information. I went on to work at Johnson & Johnson and medical devices. And then my true aha moment came in 2022, just a couple of years ago, when I was like, wait, psychedelics. That was the other 50%. Could psychedelics help these different patient populations?
What was the wait psychedelics moment? Like, what were you doing? What happened? How many drugs were you on?
Oh, good question. Well, I think it was like an accumulation. It was just like a sum of experiences. It was thinking back to my first psilocybin experience and what that felt like and what that did for me. And then it was also thinking back to my first MDMA experience, which is an interesting one because, and I've told Jane this so many times, it was the moment that I realized, because I was in my early 20s, oh, so like society doesn't want women to be friends, but when I'm around the women who are doing the MDMA, we love each other and we support each other and we lift each other up. What the fuck is that about? Like, who are these people? Why are they so evolved? And why can't we be more like this in our everyday life? Like, we don't need MDMA to be kind to each other. We don't need MDMA to experience joy. We can foster and garner that joy in our own, but MDMA shows us what we're capable of, which I think is beautiful. I've had people tell me, tell me that when they're on MDMA, the joy feels phony. And I'm just like, no, like that is you. It's just a little push to show you that it lives within you. So it's kind of like this collective, summary of these experiences, and then me wanting to go back to my original field and thinking I got to do it differently. And then I just followed the yellow brick road, and it also led me to you. So here we are.
Yow.
But you asked about the science of MDMA, so I should probably go back to that.
Let's talk. Okay, let's so much to get
go back
into.
To that.
But why is it so good, and does it need to be so good to get to these places? Okay, let's forget that second half of the question. Let's just go with the godliness situation.
The godliness.
Yeah, and it's not always like that. Like, I do think it, it brings up shadow. It's your peak
for sure
MDMA experience. Like, wait, are you relating to what I'm saying? Like, have you had the godly?
What about the unconditional appreciation for everybody, even the people that you haven't seen in 20 years. You're like, oh my God, I love that person. I haven't seen them in 15 years. I have to call them. Yeah. That's pretty phenomenal.
I mean, is it ridiculous? I don't
think so.
I don't know. Is it ridiculous?
Anybody have an opinion on that? No?
Hell no. All right. Woo! Yeah, baby. No, I mean, it's somewhere on the map, right? It's a felt sense. For me, it's not an abstract sense. It's difficult, I know, using the word God. Let's say, I don't know, sacred sounds a little like, but okay, divine.
Yeah.
Divine, you know, to me, that's a felt experience of the divine. If you can feel it in your body, if you can see it through your eyes, and there's that sort of
evokes all the senses. Evokes all the senses.
All the senses, exactly, and that feeling of, you know, spirit rising, the gospel. So, yeah, I think it's somewhere. It's an important place on the map. Is it somewhere we can be all the time? I don't know, but I think it is. It's something to map. And if you have that in your body and if you have the felt sense of it, you can then create around that. I think it's easier to create around the felt sense of something, the embodied sense of something. So that makes it, to me, very interesting in terms of, you know, creative juice.
Yeah, and there's real creative juices that are being activated and recruited. So it's like a bit of a neurochemical symphony. It's interesting because it's different from some of your classic psychedelics. Some people argue, is it a psychedelic? Is it an empathogen? For me, you know, mind activating, mind expanding substances or activities can be psychedelic. Meditation can be psychedelic, and you're not ingesting anything, right? But you are recruiting the same neurochemicals that MDMA may recruit, you know, and different plant medicines like kanna and cacao may recruit. So what's interesting and what makes it different from some of these classic psychedelics is that you're activating serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. Excuse me. And it's an interesting mechanism as well because psilocybin is like, it mimics, I love this analogy of like a key in a lock. So like psilocybin turns into psilocin, fits like a key into a lock. So it mimics that serotonin fitting into its receptor. But that's not how MDMA works. MDMA is actually inhibiting transporters and changing the way serotonin is being reuptaken into vesicles, into cells. So there's more serotonin being available for you. Way more of it is circulating. And then you've got this parallel activation of dopamine, which you don't really get with psilocybin. That's why psilocybin is so introspective and we're more sensitive. But then MDMA, we're energetic and we're confident. And in therapy now, in different models, we're also seeing this blend of psilocybin and MDMA because some people need more. They need more confidence walking into their experience. Maybe they're trying to figure something out, and it's not more introspection that they need. They need to like push forward, right? And so that parallel activation is so beautiful. That's also why it works so well with PTSD.
Yeah, exactly. MDMA gives you that holding.
Trust.
Yeah, which obviously can be problematic, but we can talk about in the...
Falling in love on dance floors is a real thing amongst certain people.
Yeah, or being with a therapist or a facilitator who has bad boundaries or whatever. So you want to... You need to be very protective of that godly experience,
well,
right?
That's why there's a light and a shadow side to everything.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that the flooding of the serotonin feels kind of important, I feel, for now. And my obsession is this sort of moving of therapeutic ideas more into the collective, like where it's already happening, like on the dance floors, because there are these spaces where people are very open and available to healing, and it's still sort of seen as just having fun. You know, I mean, well, no. There's like serious medicine happening here. You know, this is very, very serious stuff. So I think that this is serious fun. We have to take our fun very seriously. But seriously, I do think that intentional fun, serious fun.
Just infuse the experience with
but
some intention.
But the feeling of like that whatever that critical mass of serotonin is, that's making you look outwards rather than inwards, feels like a medicine for the times, because one of my concerns about the psychedelic movement is it's sort of borrowing from therapy, kind of traditional psychotherapy, which is a bit of a lonely model again, and it's a bit like close your eyes and go inward and let's see what went wrong and look at the damage and all that stuff. And there is value to that. But I think people are stuck going on those inward journeys, you know, and I think there's a lot of that with ayahuasca and oh, it's fascinating and you can go into the grandparents and you can go into the lineage and all of this stuff, which is great. You can become a lemon for 24 hours and that's really cool. But, you know, here we are, you know, on this planet together with all sorts of crazy problems going on and mental health is in the toilet and we're all these enormously creative beings. And co-creative beings in a way that's like we are just default so co-creative, like we're co-creating all the time, not even knowing it. And so, yeah, that's sort of my promotion around this idea of the flooding of the serotonin, which doesn't work that well for my system because I get a terrible come down. But I think it has so much value, even if we just harness this as an idea and we don't take MDMA. The value of getting to that point where we just start looking outwards and we really start being in that kind of matrix of connection that is heartfelt. And we're just available to each other in the way that we're so often not in our kind of like default, getting it done, rat race lives.
Yeah, I think the pandemic reprioritized mental health, but it also showed us that we were very isolated and we didn't realize that we were isolated even before the pandemic. And so it reprioritized the collective and community and made us realize how important that was. And I think what psychedelics are doing and what MDMA therapy and MDMA even like recreationally is showing us is the importance of community and the collective. But it's also showing us that the traditional models of therapy, like you're saying, can be transcended. Like group therapy is not cheap therapy. And it's not cheap therapy. Some people think like, oh, I'm going to do group therapy. It's more affordable. I'm going to split the fee with some other people. But that's not the case at all.
We're talking about free therapy here.
Yeah. Right. That too.
Like totally free.
My point is that, I mean, we had a question actually when we gave a talk in Vegas. Someone asked like, I'm going to do a therapy session with 4 or 5 people. Like, what are your recommendations? Like, what shall I do with the group? And I'm hearing this more and more because also MDMA therapy is a very long experience, 6 to 7 hours. You know, the healthcare providers being tapped in for that long, and it's expensive, right? But the group therapy, it's not to lessen the cost necessarily, but it's to bring forward these values of community and collectivism. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so let's dive into the shadow side of it. Okay. Yeah. So the come down that I keep getting back to, but it's not just the come down. So who here experiences shadow side of MDMA? Like,
I can't do it because of that.
Because of the come down.
Yeah, I can't do it.
And what can you share with us? What happens with your come down?
I'll just be in a major like depressive state for three days.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just so low.
Yeah.
And it feels brutal, honestly.
Yeah, I can completely relate. Yeah.
Entirely because of that alone.
Yeah, yeah. And I have a question about, you know, whether some people are just like that. Or where's Phoebe?
Hi, Phoebe.
Phoebe was saying, can I put you on the spot? That there are ways to really help with that, like with kanna, for example. Phoebe, do you want to just pipe up? Can you
Project.
So kanna can be a really amazing ally.
Okay, the microphone.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yay! Woo.
Hi. So kanna can be a really amazing ally and tool to use to help battle some of the come down that you can get from MDMA or MDA, sassafras type experiences. So kanna works pharmacologically as an SSRI, so a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, and it's working chemically very similarly to the way that MDMA and MDA work, but kind of on a micro scale. So if you think what's happening with like a hangover and a come down, you had so much serotonin filling up your brain, and now you have none. So that's kind of like that hangover come down. What kanna does is release or like allow more serotonin to exist in your brain on this micro scale, and it's just enough so that your mood is elevated and you feel better, so you have less of that hangover feeling, so you can get through that come down and some of that darkness and shadowiness that I think someone over there was speaking to. Mm. So look to kanna and fungi for your next hangover. Yeah.
Thanks, baby. Yeah, so Natasha, maybe we'll try that at some point. But that I appreciate. Thank you, Phoebe. That it does. You know, I trust and hope that there are more ways for people like me and Natasha to, make MDMA part of our lives without such a severe ride.
I think so. But also sometimes not everything is for everyone, right? And that's okay.
Yeah, I don't really want to hear that right now. Thank you very much. I'm still going to make this happen, God damn it, at least one more time in my life, But it brings up something else, which I think is important about this, which is expansion and contraction. And somebody here, I'm sure, knows about the laws of the universe. You're good. And yeah, I mean, what goes up must come down, and you have your divinity experience and the sisterhood and all of those wonderful things, right? And then you're alone, and it's Sunday night. Sunday scary, right? And it's a whole different kettle of fish. So what do you do about that? How do you conceive of that? Again, for me, in my negative phase of the MDMA journey, I was just like, fuck this, and I still feel like that a bit, like who has the time? But I think on a therapeutic level and a spiritual level, it's interesting, right? Where do we go when we go down that hard? What does happen, when our serotonin just depletes? And what is that? Because really, I don't know, Natasha, tell me what you think. But for me, it's an experience of disconnection. Like, I am just alone. Like, in a bad way, exactly. So it's just me, where I've been in the we. I've been in the us. Oh, I don't have to worry so much about myself because I'm part of this beautiful mass of humanity. And then it's just like, me. And it's so sad. And, I wonder about that as well, like making more space for that, making more space for the part that does exist in each side of us that does feel alone, that will feel alone at times, that sense of separation, and speaking to it more and embracing it more and having more space for it. So instead of it being like, oh shit, I'm suffering now because I partied, which is a sort of like guilt mentality, shame.
Right. There's a lot of shame in when it comes to consuming substances.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. I did this to myself. If we could have a bit more compassion and also maybe some sort of structures to look at that. So a sort of broader therapeutic structure. Tell your therapist, I'm going to be taking MDMA. I want to have 2 more sessions with you next week. Let's talk about it. And then, oh yeah, I'm really kicked back into my shit. What can we do? Oh, we need some more compassion here, because really what we're talking about is these like crunch spaces inside the self that don't have enough like the oxygen of compassion. They're not getting enough blood flow. They only come online when we're really ashamed, or we're really alone, or we're really depleted. But they're there. And they're there in society, they're there, it's a fractal situation. These places are there. So I think there's an opportunity to look at the come down as a, compassion teaching program? I don't know. What do you think?
I think we have to be gentle with ourselves. I think that like chemically you're going to experience this deep fatigue. You might experience the shame. You might experience the feeling of just being completely fried. I think there's ways that you can mitigate that. I still think it might happen regardless, because even if we look to the MDMA trials with MAPS, it was documented that people felt the come down, right? And for even sometimes up to a week, and now they were practicing within the medical model, right? And it wasn't, I think it's dose dependent. I think it's hydration, sometimes even overhydration, alcohol consumption. There were so many rumors for so long that MDMA was burning holes in your brain. Meanwhile, we were looking at scans of meth, right? And it wasn't even MDMA. I think that you need to always plan with intention. That's what I was saying before. So that means that Sunday, if Sunday is your recovery day, don't overdo it. Just create a space for yourself to just feel what you're feeling. Of course, you can check a bunch of boxes and do as much as you can to feel prepared and healthy and take all the supplements, right? Take your magnesium before you go to bed. The next day, I always take lion's mane, but I take lion's mane daily, anywhere between like 1,000 milligrams, which is a gram, to 3,000 milligrams.
What's the lion's mane doing for you?
Lion's mane is a functional mushroom. Have you seen lion's mane before? It looks like a little hairy pom-pom. They're neuroprotective, and they're being extensively researched actually for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. They're a very, very potent medicinal mushroom. Some people who are new to lion's mane actually say that they feel it. Like if they take a gram of lion's mane in like form of a tincture, they'll be like, I feel something. My brother says it makes my brain feel smooth. If you could just like imagine that.
Isn't it the Paul Stamets recommended like brain optimization with psilocybin?
Psilocybin and niacin and lion's mane. But
niacin? What is
niacin, vitamin, what is it? B6? Oh gosh, I'm forgetting right now.
That optimizes the whole thing?
Yeah. It's cardiovascular protective. It's great for your brain health as well. It's good for your skin. So niacin can actually help you flush out some toxins as well. A sauna is really nice post MDMA if you have the luxury.
A little champagne, a cold plunge, sauna. No big deal. Yeah.
But in general, I think we definitely need to like do things to protect our bodies, right? Whether it is therapeutic or recreational. But then there will be fatigue. There will be a bit of a come down. Sometimes people feel it. I don't feel it the next day, because actually the half-life of MDMA is quite long. The next day, if you've used it in the evening, you're still high the next day. You might not be at your peak, but you still are. And people who are doing MDMA in therapy, the therapeutic model, they're doing it early in the day so that they have their come down early in the day and they can get a better night's sleep. So it's just, again, it's practicing with intention. Obviously, if you're going out to a party, that might not be the case. If you have a community gathering with your friends, it might be in the evening. But the next day, give yourself space to do your rituals, to take care of yourself, to prepare for the week or whatever's coming next. And if it's shadow, it's okay. Just like feel into it. However, if it's really killing you, that's when I'm saying it might not be for everyone. And I think that we need to accept that sometimes,
I don't want to talk about that,
sorry, but it's important.
But just reminded me, there's a third part of the shadow that I'd like to look at, because there's also the shadow of what comes up when you're on MDMA.
It's a truth serum, isn't it?
The truth serum, which is why it can be so wonderfully therapeutic. For example, for couples who are not, just have a really hard time telling each other the truth. Some things are hard to talk about, like, oh, my heart has changed, I don't love you anymore, or, big deal stuff like that can come out on MDMA. But it's not just things like that. It's also like, who was talking about it being uncomfortable seeing other people, like, oh, it's fake seeing everybody hug each other, right? Yeah, and I remember having times like that actually in my university stage where I just didn't feel, even though I was on MDMA, and there were parts of it that I could really glory in, like dancing, the bits that I could really get into. But at that time, I was just too hard. Like, I didn't like doing the whole cuddle puddle thing. I was just like, phony, I didn't want to do it. And now I'm just more of a mushy person, so it's okay. I just am like that anyway. But like, it just, at the time, I wasn't comfortable with it, and it brought up my kind of lone wolf shadow, and I've taken it in relationship, and I've suddenly felt uncomfortable, thinking it's going to be like this groovy, sexy ride, and it's actually not, and you're suddenly feeling weird, and it's like, what's happening there? Is it pulling up some trauma in your body? Is it pulling up some part of the relationship? I don't know, but there's information that comes up through the shadow on MDMA, so it's got this bright lights, and then with the bright lights you also get those like dark shadows that come up.
And we should also probably debunk the question, is MDMA the best sex of your life?
No,
not necessarily you. It was a big general you, but I mean, I've had that question come up. People are like, oh yeah, like MDMA and sex, they go hand in hand. Haven't we always kind of heard that? We've heard it. Is it the truth?
so not the but okay, but then you have to break down what makes good sex.
Right, it's very subjective, but I just think of like how our bodies are feeling in those moments, and is it really an environment it's an environment of intimacy. It forges connection, but then sometimes you would just think like, oh yeah, automatically it's going to be great for sex, but not necessarily. And I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It makes me think of a client of mine who came out during the AIDS epidemic, and he was saying that MDMA was so helpful for he and his friends at that time, which was a pretty fucking crazy, traumatizing time. He was like, it was so good for the gay guys because they were like unable to get hard and feeling all loving. So they were getting to process this trauma together in a way that they wouldn't have been if they were on other drugs and they could just fuck. So they were just getting to just like really be in the connection, which is the good part of sex on MDMA, right?
It's sexy in a different way, right? If it inspires two people to share something that they might otherwise feel shy to share, a fantasy, something, it could be sexy in a different way. And it also forces us to look at how society has defined what is sexy, what sex should be like. And I think these are really interesting topics, right? Because we need to redefine. Society has like really messed up what sex should be. And I feel like young people have expectations, like the expectation that MDMA is going to be the best of their life, right? And so yeah, it's just very interesting to me because it's intimacy is what makes good sex.
Yeah, so it's got to be good in that way. It'll be intimate in that way, but not necessarily in the genital way. And I'm sure there are exceptions. I'm sure there's some people sitting here going, wait a minute,
no, I
she's
love
talking
it.
shit. Yeah. But I think in general, yeah. So what drug is best for sex?
Oh, that's a good question. Cannabis?
Cocaine.
Edgy.
I know, you can't say cocaine now. It's like really like, it's like...
I'm not saying it.
She won't even say it. You know that thing people used to take in the old days? It was really bad, really bad.
I think cannabis is really beautiful because for me, it depends, right? It's like, what is helping me feel into my body? And if MDMA is doing that for me, great. All the experiences around it will be great. But I feel like cannabis is the one for me that I can really, I feel, I think, and I feel, and everything is very forged together. And even though cannabis is not typically seen as a heart opener, I feel like it is. Well,
you can get to the heart through the body, right? So for me, cannabis gets me into the senses, into my body, and then that will help with the heart opening.
And it's such a subjective experience because I've met so many people that have said, oh, I smoked so much as a teen, I can't smoke anymore. And I've noticed that more and more. If this pattern, I smoked a lot as a teen, now I can't smoke anymore. It's too much for me.
Well, I think that's associative as well. It's like a neural pathway, which is I'm going to get paranoid and then it's going to take me out of the experience. You're already out of the experience if you're already having that thought, right?
Right.
But yeah, I guess cannabis isn't for everyone either. But then
not everything is for everyone, but that's exactly the point.
But yeah, and then it's interesting because I had thought like ketamine, for example, is not good for sex. And then somebody was just saying to me, who was it? Somebody was saying, oh yeah, I had the best sex of my life on ketamine. And then I realized, oh, it's a dosage thing because it's like, and everyone's different, but it's this interesting process of like titrating your chemicals so that you can be in an optimal state of flow to connect with another person on all the levels that work for you. So it's all one big chemistry experiment. And I think we should talk about chemistry without ingesting.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I will say that I think the moral of this whole little tidbit section that we just did is that it's a journey to develop your own relationship with a plant medicine or a psychedelic or a practice like meditation or whatever you're doing, right? And it can seem really daunting to like try to choose which one to try when you haven't, but just ease into it really gently and do your research and get educated about it. But love the process of developing a relationship with a plant or a psychedelic or a ritual. I think that's kind of
I love what you're saying because actually it brings us back to the point. love. So the point being that the application of love and the association of love around the ritual. You know, we're going to do this to make love. We're going to do this to forge love. We're going to do this to talk about our relationship. And that doesn't have to be a couple situation. It can be me, myself, and I. Like I'm going into a love zone with Jane with the assistance of, you know, this ritual, this drug, this conversation, whatever it is. But I think one thing we've learned so much, I feel, from psychedelics is this extraordinary power of intention and neuroplasticity that we can take wherever we go. I mean, I'll do it now on a hike if I ever get lucky enough to go on a hike. You know, it's really, I mean, taking an intention into a hike and just making space for something to bloom and having the idea that it will bloom, like planting the seed that it will bloom, it just works. Like our imaginations are so fertile and our hearts are so fertile that when we actually get that conversation going, and I think these chemicals help us realize this, but ultimately it's not about the chemicals, it's about us and our ability to be able to change our own minds and create and generate new, more optimal experiences together because we want to. That's all.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't have nothing to add to what you just said. It's perfect.
Come on. Thank you. Okay, so we're done. Out. Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
I'm curious about, I don't know if I need that, but I'm curious about.
It's recorded, so talking to
Oh, sorry. Okay. About like how it might affect men and women differently.
MDMA?
Right. Yeah.
Chemically?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's much research on it, but.
Well, there's an obvious
Because-
one with men that is very typical, and that's in the context of sex. I'm just going to I won't talk about it scientifically so much. I think I'll just talk about it kind of like body, mind. MDMA can put you so into your heart that it feels like you're really in your body, but it's like, I think of it as like all of the energy is being recruited to your heart center. And so the other parts of our bodies can't like activate. And so that's kind of how it is. And like, you are in your head in the sense that like you're thinking of the people that you love, and I get incredible ideas sometimes. Like it is very thought process forward, but you're not in your head in the sense of self-rumination, self-doubt, you know, kind of like anxiety thoughts. It's more like your mind is open, your heart is open, and I feel like all the energy is up here and it's not really down here. So that's kind of a difference between men and women. But anecdotally, from the conversations that I've had, people have really shared these experiences of this like deep love appreciation. I think that especially in like veteran populations and first responders where there's moral injury, you know, there's guilt, there's trauma. There are far more male veterans and first responders than women, and we're seeing how powerful this medicine is for them. And it's exactly because of that, they're getting into their hearts. And socially, the construct is that men are tough, men are hard, they're strong, they're the ones who have to lead, and women are the softer ones. And I went to a talk that was veterans and psychedelics, and they were all, there was first responders and there were veterans and ex-law enforcement, and they were all up there talking about how MDMA changed, psilocybin and MDMA changed their lives. And it was such an interesting phenomenon to experience, because typically you think of military men and you think of the first responders and they're tough and they're big and they're brave. These men were so soft and respectful of one another. And not to say that men need that to be that way, but it was just so interesting. It was, you know, and I feel like it allows men to go into their softer side without feeling any kind of self-judgment about it, and men not judging each other. There are a lot of men's groups that have, you know, communal ceremony with heart-opening substances and plants, medicines, so that they can try to drop into their feminine a little more. And on the flip side, if a woman is, you know, very comfortable in her feminine, I always find that MDMA gives them courage, and they're more like robust with their actions and their decisions, and they lead with confidence. And so it's almost like it activates that opposite side that you tend to, kind of push away or sweep under the rug or not give enough attention to. That's kind of my observation.
I love what you're saying, because it's really, you're talking about the heart in both places, like in both cases, right? Courage being a heart quality and softening being a heart quality, right? These different aspects of the heart that can get activated where they've been perhaps underserved culturally in terms of like how we're supposed to act.
And also the truth serum thing, I feel like it puts all of us in a state of mind where when we get that massive truth bomb, we're like, okay, I accept it. What am I going to do with this tomorrow? And that's the integration, right? What am I going to do to make tomorrow different? And then how am I going to live the rest of my life, right? Because then you have people that are doing medicine and it's so beautiful in the moment and my life is so amazing and I'm going to do all these things. And then we come down, we're kind of back to the default world. We're back at work on Monday. I'm just going to be an asshole to the guy next to me in traffic, or I'm just going to forget everything that I learned, right? So it's like,
exactly.
How do we...
I know. We want to like build in an accountability program, like after the club experience, like you're not allowed to leave until you commit to taking these 3 actions. Call your ex-husband, you know what I mean? Like, right? Handle your road rage. But seriously, I think that we're not mining it enough. And that goes to joy as well. It's not just the MDMA experience. It's like the party, the experience of fun, the holiday, whatever it is. It's, I guess maybe I'm just talking about myself, but there is definitely an invitation to check in and see where joy and pleasure is on your own map and whether it feels like something you fully integrated and work with in terms of medicinal value, or do you still feel like work and fun are separate or work and joy are separate? Like, who feels fully integrated here in these departments? Is anyone? Oh, yeah. I could tell because your shoes are so good. Can you tell us anything more about that? Oh, I'd love to. Would you share a bit?
Of course, sure.
Yeah.
From the come downs, thank you. When I come down, when I'm in the experience, I feel like I'm watching myself. So I feel watched, but I also feel like I'm watching myself, and that's like the higher
watched
power.
Like protected or just
no,
watched?
just like being watched, right? And it's not. It's not.
She sees it in a systematic way. So
Okay.
She kind of analyzes the process as it's happening and takes mental notes of how she's going to integrate that into her life, and she remembers the feelings and what it made her think, etc., so that she actually remembers them later and then acts upon them.
So very scientific.
Beautiful.
So
Thank you.
And you just keep on integrating it. And
what's your background? Are you just naturally like that, or have you learned through some method?
MDMA, I'm in cannabis, and I've only smoked cannabis maybe 6 months at a time, 2 years apart. And again, these experiences are very scientific, and I take notes every step of the way and integrate them into my life. So it's when I'm not doing anything, just remembering the feeling, the experiences, and then bringing them, how would I do it if I were on cannabis? And just experiencing it, practicing it.
Sometimes pretending. Like, I remember the first time I went to a rave and I saw everybody on ecstasy being so happy and huggy, and I didn't do it myself, but I just started acting that way, and I felt elated, and it was just
mirror
so easy
neurons.
To
Mirror neurons.
Mirror neurons.
People, no, I love that. The guru over here, she's like, just fake it till you make it. Yeah. That's so cool.
But it's an embodied truth.
Yeah.
Like, it's like you see it, you embody it, and then you live it. I think that's very powerful. Right. Mm-hmm. To fully be yourself.
Yeah, you bring up such a good word, permission. I was thinking about that in terms of my therapy practice. Like, what was everyone looking for? Like, when I was working with people, I could feel they're looking for something. What do they want from me? Like, what is it actually? Is it a clever turn of phrase? Is it unconditional love? I think a lot of it, those things are helpful. But, permission is such a big one. It's such a big one. People are looking for permission to truly be themselves. How weird.
Or to truly be joyful and enjoy themselves. I think we underestimate the power of joy.
I think it's the same thing. I think
Yeah.
when you really are yourself, you're a clear channel, and therefore you can feel joy. It's like it's something that exists that can run through you. I think the thing that blocks joy is being at odds with ourselves, shame, judgment, blah blah. But I do think it's also a practice. Joy is a practice, right? It's not like happiness, which is everything goes right in a day. Yay, I get to be happy. I got what I wanted. Joy is something you can practice and feel at any given moment. Is basically a big embodied yes. John, can we get a mic to John in the back? Thank you.
Hi, I wanted to ask about the FDA process with MDMA and sort of where it is, and is it on track to become not a controlled substance, and sort of where does that sit in relation to some of the other plant medicines that
Right.
are also on a similar track?
Right. So MAPS did a phase 3 clinical trial, and a few weeks ago now there was an audit from a group appointed. They really ripped it apart. They kind of ripped apart the study. There were things I think that were exaggerated, but there were a lot of important points. The interesting thing about this process is that when that phase 3 clinical trial was submitted, when that plan was submitted to the FDA saw that study for what it was, shortcomings and all, but it's just the process that they need to just accept it through, and that's just how it works. They need to carry out the study, and then they have an opportunity to then pick it apart, express their concerns. Right now, we're awaiting the FDA's decision in August. They will take into consideration what the audit brought forward, but it doesn't mean that, it'll be a flat out no. In my opinion, it will probably be a no, but it will be a no but. I'm hoping that they won't ask them to redo another phase 3 because that will be extremely difficult, time consuming and expensive. But there's things called post-commercialization studies. They're called phase 4 studies. They're what we call pharmacovigilance. So it's safety once a drug is commercialized and approved. So there will definitely be a lot of studies that will happen in that phase 4. This is the first time that the FDA has ever had to evaluate a drug paired with therapy. The FDA does not regulate therapy or psychotherapy. They're not even supposed to give an opinion on a drug. They just regulate that drug. And there are many drugs out there that have a ton of shit wrong with them as well. It's really hard for the FDA to put themselves in this mindset of drug plus therapy. So we also have to be understanding that this is a new thing, so.
Yeah, and it's understandable. There's a lot of fear around it. I mean, we've been touching on some of those points, but I mean, there really isn't that much out there that is really working with PTSD, and PTSD is a real thing. There's a lot of it out there, and I think that's our chance, right? Is that the FDA is like, we're going to have to go with something outlandish because we need a bigger boat.
But they have to recognize that in the first place. And a lot of the people who did the audit weren't even recognizing that point. They were denying that point, which I think is extremely problematic. Yeah. Saying that the current therapies are effective or effective enough, which I was just like, what
just
are you? Yeah. But when we started talking about this topic, we named the topic MDMA, bridging the gap between healing and joy, because people think when we say healing, it means that we've got a problem, kind of what you were saying, like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with us? Healing does not necessarily mean that you're broken, right? You can say that something is very healing and mean that was refreshing, that refreshed my mind, that gave me a new outlook. I was tired and now I feel energized. That can be healing. Just like when you jump into the ocean, right? And it's cold and it's amazing and it takes your breath away and you feel healed. Like, how many times do you feel like, oh my God, that I jumped into the ocean, I'm renewed, right? And so these big explosions of joy I feel like I equate with that feeling, and it's not necessarily like I need to be healed because I'm broken, but I still think that they're incredibly healing. So I feel like we also have to redefine or remove this stigma from the word healing.
Yeah, well, I think healing's gotten attached to psychotherapy, and psychotherapy concepts are now becoming like mainstream. Everybody talks about trauma. Like in my daughter's generation, they have all these therapy concepts, kind of
trauma bonding,
trauma dumping. Everything's
and they're
trauma.
misdefined. They're not being defined or used correctly either.
Not necessarily, but yeah, I mean, it's just kind of the way things go, unfortunately, right? There's a bit of a lag, but yeah, so healing is getting paired with psychotherapy and the idea of brokenness, but what really healing means is wholeness. So it's just a subtle shift, but it's a huge shift, right? It's like going from the back foot to the front foot, which is putting the idea of innate wholeness in front of us, right? That wholeness exists both as a collective archetype, but also as something that is inside us that we can kind of tap into. So instead of fixing my brokenness, I'm going to incarnate my wholeness because it's there. My brokenness is there, sure. My wholeness is here too, right? And so I'm going to lead from that place, and I'm going to look for the wholeness in the other person in front of me. And then, okay, now we're creating more wholeness together. This feels pretty good. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. We co-create it. And healing then becomes something cool, not this sort of like lame, like, oh, healing, it's like, we're fucking healing, we're like, we're creating, we can be a beast about this, like, do you know what I mean? Because I used to hate that word, because it was like, crystals and goddesses and healing, and I was just like, oh, don't let me go there, and I just went straight for it. I was just like, oh shit, it's just, I think these are really like.
I like when you said the innate wholeness.
Yeah.
Because we are whole, right? And like shit happens, and like then it changes our relationship to self. And at the end of the day, we need to love ourselves, accept ourselves in order to love and accept others.
Yeah. So it's a practice, right?
Yes,
it's a yes to the self. It's a yes to the moment. To me, that's what the joy practice is really. Not about being happy, but about, yes, like the full embrace of here, now, the complexity of the given moment, all of the bits and bobs in the given moment, and the practice of saying, yes, I embrace it. Yes, I meet it. Yes, I'm not going to analyze it. I'm just going to keep saying yes, and I'm going to keep moving forwards in that state and keep pulling focus on that yes to what I'm actually experiencing right here, right now. The yes and.
Mm-hmm. Yes and yes. Yes and yes.
Yes and yes.
Would you be open to sharing what brings you joy? Like just shoot your hand up and
there's a question first.
Yeah, go ahead. Sure. Yes, tell us.
So the word love came up a lot. This is a chemical that brings up feelings of love, but English is a bit of an impoverished language when it comes to that word love. It's supposed to serve for a lot of different meanings, like, I love shrimp, I love my mom, I love my dog, I love chocolate. So which love are you guys referring to?
Thank you. Great question. Yeah, I mean, the love, I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. To me, not so much the shrimp. Is it? I don't eat shrimp, so I don't know. But like, I love chicken. To me, it's about connection and feeling connected to other humans. So greater love. We have touched on romantic love when we're talking about that, sex and connecting. But to me, humanity, connection, feeling good in yourself, in your heart, and being able to connect to somebody else in that way that is kind of like kind and open. So to me, it's more of a universal, which is more of like the idea of like source in a way.
For me, it's very deep appreciation and being seen. And I feel like those go really hand in hand, because when I deeply appreciate someone, it's because I really see them, and then vice versa. Like feeling seen by a loved one, friend, family It's a love language, like really knowing that they know who you are, not just your favorite color, your favorite food, if you like shrimp or not. It's more like, who are you at your core? And I appreciate who you are at your core, light and shadow, good and not so good, up and down. That's the love I think that we're talking about. And you can have love like that for your family. You can have that in romantic love. You can have it for your friends. You can have it for life. I find myself practicing actively practicing more gratitude than ever before. I was a grateful person throughout life. Say thank you, be appreciative of what you've given, the opportunities that you have, but it was very fleeting for me. Not that I was ungrateful, but it was a fleeting thought and emotion. I have to say that when I found psychedelics and plant medicines and ritual, it's like an active practice, not like I need to, and some people, they do this. They sit down, they dedicate 5 minutes of their morning to practice gratitude. I'll do that, but I also find myself very randomly in the middle of the day, just stopping what I'm doing and literally almost like a prayer saying thanks to myself and to whatever out there is listening to me, but just actively practicing gratitude. And I also think that love and gratitude go hand in hand, very much so. The true embodied feeling of gratitude, not just like, I feel lucky. No, it's not that. It's not feeling lucky. It's not feeling fortunate. It's much deeper. It's much deeper than that. And it's a feeling that I have like right here.
Yeah, I think that the gratitude word can be tricky, or it has been for me, because it's felt a little moral, like you should be. So for me personally, I reframe it more as appreciation. You were talking about appreciation. So if I think about the word appreciation, I don't know, it's more of a feeling to me. The gratitude seems to be more of an idea. That's just personal. So, what can I really feel that I appreciate? And then that gets me more into that sense of kind of connectivity. But yeah, I think we're both talking about in slightly different ways, but that the love that sort of keeps on opening, that doesn't zero down into the shrimp or to the other person, the one other person, but to the greater, the feeling of greater good, the feeling of expansion, which is really what the gratitude or the appreciation exercise does generate. You start small, you start with shrimp or chicken, and you grow, chicken, and you grow. That's what my dog does every day. Chicken, grow. And you do start from the small, and you go from small to small to small. But as you go from small to small to small, like item that you appreciate, item that you appreciate, item that you appreciate, it becomes much more about the feeling around it feels good to love. It feels good to appreciate. Ooh.
Feels good not to judge either. I feel like that goes hand in hand, not make snap judgments and accept people for who they are, and then cultivate a group of people around you that share those values. That is also one love.
Yeah, that's all the motion of expansion, isn't it? Because judgment wants to hone down, and it's important, right? I mean, discernment is really important. That's an important part of judgment.
That was my word of the year last year, discernment.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
It's a good lesson.
It is a good one. It's a good one, because there is part of judgment that is good, right? Discernment is good. We need to make decisions. We need to use our brains. We need to think, am I really going to take MDMA with this facilitator who I feel a little bit dicey about? Like, that's discernment, right? Okay, sorry. Did we answer? More than enough. Blah, blah,
I'd
blah.
love to do a little, if you're open to a little group activity.
Yeah. But also I like the idea of asking about the joy.
That's
so
I'll let,
okay,
to do.
you go.
Yeah. So we could do one of two things. We could have people, if you'd like, to share openly what brings you joy.
Or a joy practice or anything about joy.
But then after somebody shares, we say thank you.
Oh, okay.
And then we can move on to someone else. Does anyone want to go first?
I've already got the mic. So classical music concerts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just why don't you pass the mic to whoever?
Puppies.
Thank you.
Deep, soulful conversations with people I love.
Thank you.
house music shows and dance floors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I love and feel joy when I commune together with loved ones and make a nice meal and break bread together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm thinking of some more extreme experiences of joy. It's when I do something, when I accomplish something that I've given put my whole into, like free diving is an example. I go on the deepest dive ever. Like I worked hard at this. This is something that I brought my full self to. That's like sort of peak joy experiences for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. MDMA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So, you know, like, we have more? We have more?
Come on.
Anyone else?
Anyone in the front row?
I find joy in playing music and just getting lost in the language of music. I can turn off my there's still logic going on, but it's just different language, and I really enjoy it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I get joy when I see my son smile and laugh.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, let's get the front row.
Okay, I get joy in like co-creation experiences with people, just because we all have visions for what a novel or original idea looks like, and making trade-offs with other people to find that center is really exciting.
Thank you.
My body gives me joy.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes.
Other people and their joy brings me joy. So community, I think, is my number one.
Thank you. Beautiful. That feels good.
That feels great.
Yeah.
See, like, so, I mean, we said it before, these plant medicines, these psychedelic substances like MDMA, they just show us what's possible, but it all lives inside of us. Doing something so simple like this, I think, brought all of us joy, right? We feel a little bit more connected. And I think just like infusing daily practices, or even, once in a while, something with deep intention is important. So no matter how you're practicing, just lead with intention and lead with curiosity, an open heart and curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah, I second that. Are there any questions? Or if we, okay, great.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think you guys touched on a lot of the, we all agree on what you're saying, but can you share some scientific studies and results, and maybe like how many times people need to do this, and then how the lasting effects and how they integrate, and what the process and practice of that looks like from an...
When you say do this, are you talking about MDMA specifically?
Yeah. I mean, aside from how it feels and
right.
all the opinions about it, like what are the scientific studies, what do they say, like what are the practical ways of using it, and what are the lasting effects?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So what we're seeing right now is, like I mentioned before, the MDMA journey is quite long, and it is taxing on our bodies. Like, people who have experienced MDMA in recreation know it, and just because it's a therapeutic medical model doesn't mean that it's different. So they're spacing out the therapy sessions, 4 to 6 weeks even. What's really interesting is that, there are scores for PTSD, there's different questionnaires. After 1 or even 2 experiences, people are scoring outside of PTSD. They're not testing for PTSD anymore. So that's huge, because we were talking about the audit, and we were talking about how people are saying that traditional therapies are just fine for PTSD. That's not the same type of result that we're seeing at all. The other thing is that SSRIs are not getting you to the root of your trauma. MDMA is helping you drop out of this trauma, right? And the trauma, the event is traumatic because it's like a maladaptive consequence, right? It's like you're now triggered, you're reacting in an emotional manner that is not, I'm going to say, quote unquote, appropriate, right? So it's a dysfunctional state. That's a pattern that becomes extremely rigid. And what psychedelics are doing is, we talk about this like critical window of learning. When we're children, we're sponges for learning, right? Our brains are wide open. We can learn languages. We can learn so many things. Look at children today on iPhones and like iPads. They're just, right? So when we get older, everything kind of becomes more rigid. And when we have to make a change to a pattern, like in the case of trauma, it's very, very, very difficult. So we're opening these windows, and MDMA, actually, you're able to measure that window, that critical window. It is one of the longest critical windows for learning. So when it comes down to it, it's relearning how to react in the face of this traumatic experience, for example. And it doesn't have to be trauma, it could be something challenging, right? Psychedelics are not just for people who suffer from deep, severe mental health problems. We should all have access, because we're all going to struggle at some point with something difficult, with self-love, with self-acceptance. So I think they're amazing tools for reshaping. There's an analogy, I think it was Michael Pollan who said this: when you're skiing down a mountain and everything is like packed and like trim and like you can go down all these like trails, the trails are kind of pre-configured for you. So that's how your adult brain is. Think of your integration session post psychedelics as an opportunity to go down first tracks on a powder day before the slopes are groomed for you. You are now forging new paths. When we look at really interesting imagery of neurons that have dendrites, so like branches on like psilocybin and MDMA, the branches are actually reaching out longer towards each other. These images, you can find them. The name of the scientist who actually did this particular study is escaping me right now, but if you're interested, I could find it for you. The fMRI scans, which look at blood flow in the brain, are showing that typically certain areas of the brain are lit up at a time, certain networks are lit up at a time, but in psychedelics, you're getting this full-blown light up where areas that typically don't work together are now working together, right? You've got your amygdala, that's part of your limbic system, so that's like your center for emotion, but it's emotion like anxiety and fear and self-doubt. You've got these networks like the default mode network and the task positive network. Are you familiar with those? Yeah, a little bit. So they're sometimes unbalanced. So like the ratio of activation is unbalanced. And so there's a quieting in certain circumstances of the default mode network when it's inappropriately activated, and when the task positive network is underactivated, is now being reactivated. So there's different mechanisms that we're seeing, but this neuroplasticity, this conversation is neuroplastic, right? Like you're learning, you're gonna take something away, but the neuroplasticity is like tenfold, and the opportunity for relearning is just massive. And that's, I think, the key to why it's working. Yeah, I don't know if that kind of answers, or if you want to go deeper into.
Can I just add to that?
Stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
Because I know you're wanting to get specific, and I'm sure some of what Stephanie just said spoke to that. But I also feel like there's a kind of a drop-off point in terms of specificity when it comes to results. I mean, in this whole field, really, of psychotherapy meets spirituality, it's pretty, results may vary, okay? You know, it's all pretty off-piste. As somebody said, we're building the plane while we're flying the plane. So neuroplasticity is the point. We don't really have all the results yet, because we're talking about creation, really. We're talking about moving into more creative mindsets. And of course, PTSD. There's a movie called Trip of Compassion, which is a documentary that documents MDMA psychotherapy for PTSD. And if you're interested in that, it shows you very, very clearly and simply why it's effective. Just by watching it, you'll get a different sense of it.
Can I ask, those treatments of 4 to 6 weeks, are those like microdoses or like Coachella doses?
No, these are the full these are full doses, 75. So there's a range of like 25, 50, 75 milligrams of MDMA. 100 to 300 milligrams of MDMA is a higher dose. So like Jane is saying, it's very much case per case, right? So like you might be ready for a larger dose because you are experienced. You might be, you know, a client or a patient in MDMA therapy, but you're experienced, so you feel comfortable at higher doses. So it's case per case. Do we want to ease someone into it? Do they need to be broken of their rigidity and actually sent with a higher dose? Like, it's really interesting how it's not a one size fits all. We know safe doses, We know what it interacts with. We know what medication shouldn't go with MDMA. We know how it's metabolized. We scientifically know and pharmacologically know a lot. We know how it's metabolized. We know what enzymes metabolize it. We know what other enzymes are activated for other drugs. So we know what drugs you shouldn't be on, which ones we need to taper, how to taper. It's all very case by case. There's certain people that maybe MDMA would help, but because they're on some other medication like seizure medication and it's working phenomenally for it, we're not going to do MDMA for them because taking them off could be extremely devastating and destabilizing. So it's all a case per case. But on a pharmacological level, we actually know a lot about MDMA. It's now the human part that we have to figure out. And that's going to take some time. So even if it's approved by the FDA in August, we have to do so much work to pay attention to what happens next. We don't know. It has not been documented enough. Even though it was been used since the 60s, it was used in a very different way. And some people were paying attention, but not as much as we are now. So it's going to be very interesting, definitely. But the human piece is so important. We shouldn't get too bogged down by the science because, yes, the science is important. It's the foundation of keeping people safe and healthy. But now it's the human piece that is very, very, very much at the heart of the matter. Yeah.
Well said, yeah. So I'm very well versed with like psilocybin, and I have a lot of clients per se ask me about MDMA usage and what's the safety protocol. Like in terms of psilocybin, I know you kind of have to take breaks in order for your brain to kind of heal. Is that the same thing with MDMA? And
yeah.
How would you recommend people to, like, I know folks who use it to microdose and, during therapy or to have heartfelt conversations to deepen their relationships. So in terms of whether it's micro or macro dosing MDA, like what would you suggest these periods of like pause in between to allow your brain to heal so that you're not building a tolerance or harming yourself?
Good question.
Yeah. On the larger dose side, it is at least 4 weeks. That's what we're seeing in therapy practice. Again, everyone has their own relationship with it. And the other piece of it is kind of what I said before, is that how are you using it? Are you using it with alcohol? Are you using it with other psychedelic drugs? Like, are you staying out late? Like, what is the environment, in which you're consuming it? Because that's what can make it unhealthy. And because it's so popular in the rave and dance scene, those are the habits. We're seeing alcohol use, we're staying up late. It makes you thirsty, right? It does. So people tend to be like, I need to stay hydrated. But actually, if you overly drink water, you're depleting your electrolytes. And that could actually make you feel more sick and hungover, fried the next day. So electrolytes should definitely be part of the care package for your aftercare. But I think it really depends on the dose. It depends on how you're doing it. I definitely think you should space it out. There is a tolerance for sure.
Also, it depends on the experience itself. I feel like people, myself included, have gone so hard at psychedelics and accrued too many experiences to actually process. I still think about ayahuasca that I did 13 years ago, insights that came to me. I'm still thinking about that one in Bali when I was 18. These are big deal experiences, and that's something I want to speak to beyond it's definitely connected to the chemical, but it's also, I don't know, I think having reverence for ripping the lid off your mind and ripping the front of your heart off and having a completely different experience. And I want that
to do it again. Like,
yeah,
is that what you're saying? Like,
it's very special. It's special. Yeah. It's sacred. It's amazing. It's fucking like so privileged, I think, to be able to do that. It's like ultimate freedom. It's amazing, and crazy amounts of information zoom in. Like crazy amounts of information. So what? You're gonna do it again? So you're gonna? I mean, look, I'm completely like guilty as charged, but over time, because I've been exploring this for a long time, I'm realizing that, sometimes less is more. And if we can just have the patience to sit with these experiences, we can actually realize their potential in a more gracious way, Yeah. Good. Alrighty.
Thank you for being so tapped in with us.
Yeah,
and
thank you
joining
so
us.
much. Good group of people.